Happy New Year 2023 and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Robin Wong. I'm a photographer based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I have with me a full-frame DSLR that was banned in China. This is the Nikon D600 and I want to share my experience using this camera in this video. Let's do this! Before we dive in, here are some important disclaimers. I have no connection or affiliation to any camera brands or manufacturers out there. I bought this camera with my own money. And I'm still primarily a micro four thirds shooter. I shoot with my Olympus OMD gear for my professional jobs as well as personal projects. I am a photographer. As a photographer, I love all cameras out there and I'm curious about any cameras that I can get my hands on. This is not a review of this Nikon D600 because this camera has been out for more than 10 years now and there's no point for me to publish anything because whatever review there is, whatever there is to say about this camera, someone has said it already and they're available everywhere online. I'm just sharing my experience using this D600 and maybe what I like and dislike about this camera. Fun fact, this Nikon D600 was banned in China. This camera came with a manufacturing defect. The mechanism on the image sensor, it leaks lubricant oil onto the image sensor. So we get some oil stains. It can be visible in your images if you shoot at high f number, narrow aperture like f8 or f11. And this problem in the images, they are quite difficult to fix in post-processing. Nikon acknowledged this problem as their manufacturing defect and they also provide free repair and service to fix this issue beyond their warranty period. However, the customers in China were really unhappy, they complained and they wanted refund, but the retailers and the dealers, they refused to give back the customers money and the problem escalated quickly and it was even featured in a documentary on a national television. Things got really bad and the China government somehow decided to just ban the sales of this camera and whatever of this camera that is left on the shelves were to be recalled immediately. As far as I remember, on consumer level camera, this Nikon D600 was the only camera that was banned from sales anywhere in the world. So how did I end up getting this Nikon D600? It is quite an interesting story. As the year 2022 was coming to an end, I thought to myself, hey Robin, let's do something interesting, something different. I've always been curious about full-frame cameras and I thought of getting the cheaper, more affordable options like say the Canon RP or the Nikon Z5 or even the Sony A7C just to see what these cameras are all about, what they can do. Maybe I can open up to an option of getting another full-frame camera, say more advanced camera to complement my current setup. I don't want to just go in blind and spend a lot of money and regret later. So I was looking at these options, but every single budget options out there, it comes with some kind of compromise and I'm not willing to live with it. Say for example the Canon RP full frame, yes it is the cheapest among all the options, but it doesn't have 5-axis image stabilization. Then the Nikon Z5, yes it is also a very good option. It has 5-axis image stabilization, but it doesn't have a flip screen. So I thought I'm not going to spend this money and not having all these features that I need. And of course the Sony A7C. I don't know whether you agree with me or not, but man, that is the ugliest camera that I've seen in my life. I'm not going to throw my money to Sony and get such an ugly camera. So while I was looking at these cameras, I was of course looking for the used camera in a good condition and of course an affordable price. In that used market, I found someone selling this Nikon D600 for about 800 ringgit. 800 ringgit is less than 200 US dollars. For less than 200 US dollars, you get a full frame DSLR and the image sensor that's featured in this camera. If you check the DSO mark, if you believe in the numbers that they publish, the performance of the image sensor in D600 is on par and is very close to even the modern, latest full-frame DSLRs or mirrorless cameras out there. It is not lagging too far behind. If my purpose is just to find out what this full-frame sensor can do, I think this serves its purpose. Yes, the camera may be old, it may be more than 10 years old, but the image sensor in this Nikon D600, it can still do its job, and it is no slouch in comparison to even the latest cameras today. So I bought this Nikon D600, and boy oh boy was I really excited to use it. I've been shooting with the Nikon D600 for a few rounds now, and there are things that I like and dislike about this camera. First of all, I really like the beefy handling of this camera. The hand-holding grip is very substantial and it feels really secure, and handling is really comfortable, and I just love holding this camera. But I do admit that this camera is on the heavier side of things, but I'm not using large and heavy lenses. I'm just using tiny lenses, prime lenses. I only have two lenses, the 50 f1.8D and the Yongnuo 35 f2. So small lenses on a big camera is still a very compact and usable setup. I like that the camera is very solidly constructed. It is a combination of magnesium alloy and plastic body. It does feel really premium. It feels really solid in hand. It feels very reassuring. There's no creaky parts whatsoever. It feels like it's built like a tank. It inspires confidence every time I use this camera. I love the viewfinder. It's really large. It gives 100% coverage, and it's bright, and it's so easy to compose with such a really bright optical viewfinder. The autofocus is generally very fast in good lighting conditions. I have no issue whatsoever. I cannot comment on the image quality too much because I'm not using the best lens, and this is a really good image sensor to optimize the image output, to get every single pixel, squeezing it out of the image sensor. I will need higher grade lenses, maybe a pro grade lens, but I only have a cheap budget, really old 50 f1.8 and of course the Yongnuo 35 f2. So these lenses, pairing it with this camera, is not the best combination, and I can't tell you whether the sharpness is good enough or not. But based on the image quality that I see coming out of this combination, I'm very happy with the results. I have no complaint whatsoever. Oh, and I also really treasure the dual cut slots. Yes, this is an entry-level full frame, although it is entry-level, but it has dual cut slots, and that is actually something I really need for a lot of the things that I do in photography. The Nikon D600 having a full frame image sensor, of course, the dynamic range is excellent. It has really good high ISO low light shooting. Now, I'm sure some of you will ask, so Robin, you are a macro four thirds shooter. You have been using Olympus OMD for more than 10 years now. How does this full frame sensor compare to the Olympus sensor? Some people will say, this is not a fair comparison. This is not the latest full frame. If you want to compare, you should compare to, say, the Sony A7 Mark IV, or say the Canon R5, or Nikon Z7 or Z6 Mark II. These are the latest sensors, right? But bear in mind that Olympus micro four thirds sensor is not new. It has also been released since 2017. 2016, so it's quite an old sensor, and this is not a new camera. This was launched in 2012, 2013, so the gap between this sensor and the Olympus sensor is not that far, and I don't have the latest or M1 to compare. So comparing this to EM1 Mark II or EM1 Mark III, which I have, it's not too far of a stretch. Now here's where the things get really interesting. When I compare the images, I shot in RAW and I processed directly in Capture One Pro. I left the noise reduction to default. I didn't touch the noise reduction at all. The ISO 6400 from the Olympus EM1 Mark III and the ISO 6400 file from this Nikon D600, they look about the same, which is really interesting. Now, of course, there might be some noise reduction trick in the software that I'm not aware of, but the output is about the same. And if you compare at the ISO 12800, again, with noise reduction set to default, it is about the same. Now then I thought, okay, maybe it's a noise reduction trick, so I turned off the noise reduction. I set the noise reduction slider to 0, both the luminance and the chroma noise. I set both to 0 for both the Olympus and Nikon files, and we can see a difference. Yes, the Nikon D600, it does have an advantage over the micro four thirds sensor in the EM1 Mark III. You can see the 6400, the Nikon is definitely cleaner. The Olympus file has more chroma noise, it looks coarser, the noise grain doesn't look as great. Same with the ISO 12800, but we know that, or a lot of people claim that a full frame camera, the sensor size is 4 times bigger than the micro four thirds sensor, and you get 2 stops or more high ISO performance, right? If 2 stops advantage is true, then the ISO 12800 from this Nikon D600 should perform better than the ISO 6400 on the Olympus EM1 Mark III. That's not even 2 stops. That's about 1 stop. And I put them side by side. Yes, the Nikon is better, but it is not even 1 stop better. The 12800 is not even 1 stop better than the ISO 6400 from Olympus. Now this is really interesting. Before you celebrate the victory, before you claim, wow, you know, Olympus is superior, this is why we use micro four thirds. Micro four thirds is good, whatever. Before you do that, of course, my test methods are flawed. That's definitely a problem. There are so many inconsistencies that I cannot control. For example, the lighting conditions may have changed while I was taking a photograph between the Olympus and Nikon. And the f number of the lens, Nikon's f1.8 may be different from the Olympus f1.8. The aperture may be f1.8, but the transmission value may be different. There might be like a half a stop difference there and here. And one very important thing, the ISO measured on the camera, what the manufacturers claim, may not be the true ISO that is standardized. And this is proven in DSLR's site, where they measure the true ISO of the camera. You can clearly see that Olympus somehow cheated. Well, Olympus is not the only one that cheated. Fuji, Canon, they also cheat to some degree. And you can see that it is about 1 stop or more ISO cheating, right? The ISO 6400 is actually ISO 3200 or even lower. So that explains the gap. If you compensate all these differences, if you factor in the cheating of ISO, yes, this Nikon D600 may have about 2 stops high ISO advantage over the Olympus. But having said all that, if you just take ISO 6400 Olympus, default noise reduction and ISO 6400 on this Nikon, and you put side by side, you can barely notice a difference. If you ask me whether the micro four thirds is good enough, it is definitely more than sufficient for all the photography that I do, and I didn't really wish for something better most of the time. But also, being truthful here, I must acknowledge that having a larger size sensor does give you some benefits, and it has advantages if you really want to push the images. It is what it is. You don't have to agree with the way I test. You don't have to agree with my statement. Feel free to argue whatever you want. We are awful. I'm not a scientist. I don't study how this image sensor work. My understanding is very limited, but I am a photographer. All I care is results. If I can get the results that I want, at the end of the day, that's all that matters. Now let's come back to this Nikon D600. As much as I want to love this Nikon D600, it does come with some serious problems. And these problems do affect the way I do my photography. Now, the first problem is autofocus. Generally, in bright light, the autofocus has no issues. It is snappy, it gets the image quickly, and it's quite accurate. However, when the light level drops, I'm not even talking about extreme low light. It's just normal low light conditions when you're shooting at, say, ISO 800 or 1600. Indoor conditions, right? The autofocus starts to struggle. It will always give me some false confirmation, and I thought I got the focus, and I clicked the shutter button, and I actually missed the shot. And I have some quick action shots, which was really interesting. It happens in the rain. I was chasing people, and during that critical moment, I just quickly point the camera at that particular subject, center it, try to lock the focus, and click the shutter button immediately. And this camera has missed too many shots. If I would dare to say, this is one of the less reliable autofocus camera that I've encountered in a long time. I've never missed so many shots using any cameras before this. Now, besides the autofocus problem, the metering is also very inconsistent. Now, when I point this camera at the subject, I'm not moving, the subject is not moving, the lighting condition stays the same. I half press the shutter button, I take 3 shots. All these 3 shots were metered differently. Why, Nikon? What's wrong with your metering? Nothing changed. I didn't change my framing, lighting didn't change, the subject didn't move, I didn't move. Why was the metering different? It was so inconsistent that I always get underexposed image, and it is severely underexposed, especially when there's something bright in the background, and it is just so annoying. And white balance is another problem. This white balance in this camera is quite problematic. It always doesn't give you the color that you want, but that's okay because I was shooting RAW. At least I can fix that in post-processing. Now, the camera at the top dial, there's a dial on the dial which I don't understand why they do that. I think it is very annoying because if I want to quickly change the drive mode, say I want to shoot in burst continuous, I need to press on the button, hold it down, and turn the dial at the same time. It is so annoying. I know some people say, but this can come in muscle memory. But what muscle memory? I don't change from single shot to burst all the time. I only change it from time to time. Every time I want to do that, I need to look at it and spend some effort doing it, and that can cause me to miss shots. Overall, I think this is a good camera, but it does have some problems there and here, and I think as a camera manufacturer, this should have been fixed and it shouldn't be left unchecked. I'm not sure if you can see it, but it's starting to rain and I have to stop this video very soon. In conclusion, the Nikon D600 is quite a capable camera. The image sensor does give you really good performance, you get really good resolution, you get excellent dynamic range and high ISO performance. However, the camera itself is quite flawed. Of course, there's the reason why it was banned in China. There's the oil stain issue, and the autofocus is not really reliable in low light. I have issues with the white balance, I have issues with the metering. It's kind of make it really annoying because I think value for money wise, the Nikon D600 is a really good camera. It doesn't cost a lot even when it first came out. It can be a really good backup camera for those using Nikon D800 or higher level cameras. But knowing all these flaws, it's very hard for me to recommend it to anyone. In fact, after I got the D600, I was considering to sell off my Canon 5D. There's no point keeping 2 full frame cameras, but even the Canon 5D, the autofocus is more reliable, the white balance is definitely more accurate, the metering is reliable. I've not encountered all these issues in the older dinosaur Canon 5D. So who knows, maybe I won't keep the Nikon D600. I will still have it now for a bit more. I will bring it out to shoot, do some shutter therapy, but maybe this will be the camera that I will let go very soon. That's all I have to share about the Nikon D600. If you have owned one before, please share your experience using the camera in the comments below. Do you agree with my findings? I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you found my sharing beneficial, or if you've enjoyed looking at my photographs, please consider buying me a cup of coffee, or you can contribute directly to my PayPal. Links in the description below on how you can do that. Any small contribution goes a long way. It will definitely help me to continue making content and publish them right here. And boy oh boy, I have really interesting coming lined up at this beginning of the year 2023. And as usual, please go out and take more photographs. Bye bye.